Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church, to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Broughton. Today we have back with us Dave Peterson. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you. We
are looking at the Gospel reading for the third Sunday of Easter or after Easter, Easter 3. It is from
Easter 2.
I mean, yeah, whatever. It all depends, right, how you say it, apparently. According to LSB, it's Easter 3. So.
Right. I think TLH has Easter 2.
Okay. So it is from John's Gospel, chapter 10, verses 11 to 16. And I'll read that in the New King James. Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But a hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep and am known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd." So this is your favorite passage for the words you have to pronounce.
That's right.
Yeah.
Shattering steep from the wolf.
Yeah. I totally forgot about it until I got to that word, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is that. Yeah.
Shattering skeep by the wolf. Wolf. I was funny when you were reading that. I was just realizing what a great translation hireling is. Mm-hmm. Because that's not really, that's kind of, hireling's pejorative in English.
It is.
And this is really just a hired man. That's what the word means. And I think I like that translation because it should be pejorative, right? He's hired to protect the sheep from the wolves. It's the L that I can't get. The wolves and when he sees them, he runs away, right? So he fails to do his duty because he's only doing it for money. He's a mercenary in the worst sense of the word. So hireling's I like it.
Yeah, I think even in the sense of hired man, they don't have the same buy-in or
right.
They're not as fully invested, obviously, as those who own it.
Yeah, of course. But I don't think hired hand is a pejorative term.
No, it's not.
Hireling is.
Yeah, but I think that's the question. Is he trying to be pejorative here? Or is he just trying to state the facts that there's a difference between those who actually own and those who don't? And you should not expect to get from non-owners what owners have. Recalibrate your expectations.
Yeah, but I think he is being pejorative here because he is speaking of the failure of the religious leaders of Jerusalem and the fact that they're not doing their jobs.
Mm. And not just the religious leaders.
No, not just the religious leaders, right? But primarily the religious leaders. The secular leaders. You can hardly put Herod and Pilate into this category. The battle was lost long before those pagans came to the throne.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it could also be just commentary on the pining for the past kings.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
And
you're right.
So in the history of Israel, they get to the wilderness, right? And they put me back in Egypt because, there was meat pots and garlic and cucumbers.
Right.
And then and they had forgotten about how they cried out to God for release and saving. And so perhaps in a similar way here, there's a pining, even among the disciples, of reinstituting the kingdom.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I like to say that the history of Lutheranism is the history of bad bishops, right? I mean, so we have these modern day Lutherans that sort of pine for the great Episcopal systems that, would be so much better than what we have. But if you look at the history of Lutheranism, we've not fared well under bishops. And, I think maybe you could say the history of Israel, at least from David on, is the history of bad king. Well, from Saul on, as soon as they have one, basically, it's bad kings. And
I mean, the difference, of course, is Jesus is saying you need to have the right king.
Yeah, no,
and
right.
What we say is, well, we just won't have bishops then.
I know. Right.
And so instead we'll have presidents, and we've fared much better, I'm sure.
Well, I think we have. I mean, really.
We still have bishops.
Yeah, I know. We just call them something different. But
yes.
I do think, though, that actually, if you look at the history of the Missouri Synod, right, we're 100. How old are we? It is 150, right? Yeah, more than that now.
More than that. I
mean, that's a pretty good stretch of time of orthodoxy. And when you look at the history of Lutheranism, you'd be hard pressed to find a stretch that long. And not that obviously it's been perfect or fully orthodox all the time, but what, like you like to say, on the whole and for the most part, the Missouri Synod's been pretty steadfast. It's had its blind spots, right along with the culture it's lived in, and pretty much defined by, sadly conformed to the culture it lived in often. Before the Civil War, and then, during this, you could just ride along, you kind of go, oh yeah, look at that. They just fit in exactly like their neighbors. But anyway, I'm not, of course, it's not saying here that we don't need a shepherd because the hirelings suck at it. We do need a shepherd. And in fact, even the hired hands that do this work are actually supposed to do it.
Yeah. So do you think that this is commentary specifically on the religious leaders, or do you think that there's more to the overarching sentiment of we just need to reinstitute the kingdom and everything will be fine? Kick the Romans out.
Right. Well, I think so whenever when I've looked at this text, I think I always just think about the office of the ministry because of the language that's here. This is, of course, the Latin word pastor means shepherd. But as I was preparing at this time and looking at it and thinking about it, it seems to me that he's really talking about sacrificial leadership that's paternal. And some of the language in here is more really appropriate for the household than it is for the church or the government, I would say. And of course, that's probably because both of those things are derivative from the house, right? But when he says, "I know my sheep and am known," it's as the Father knows me, right? So he's invoking that language quite explicitly, and as I know him, and then I die for them is really interesting. Then God the Father is the grandfather, right? You kind of have this, and then if you read the next two verses, right, in John's Gospel, right, no one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. And then, this command I have received from my Father. So I think that actually, when we look at this, we're seeing, it certainly can be applied and is rightly applied to the office of the ministry, and can be and is rightly applied to anyone who is exercising authority in any of the affairs of men, including in the kingdom of God's left hand, and so forth. But really, I think, we ought to all hear this as kinds of dads and husbands, as the heads of households, right? What are we doing? And in that sense, I do think that in this text, that the primary threat is spiritual. That the wolves that are attacking, are not the it's not the Mongol, it's not Attila the Hun coming with his army. It's a spiritual battle. And are we willing to engage in that or not? And the thing is that you can run away and probably almost no one will notice.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the damage that's going to be done to your children and to your wife if you don't stay and fight and teach and lead, right? So then, think about
So you think that he's pointing out the passivity of the people in general, of not necessarily failures in doing the wrong things, but failures in doing the right things.
Yeah, and love of money, right, is again here, because the hireling is literally a person who's paid. The hired, that's the word for money that we're translating, right? He's working for pay, and he's not working with any kind of sense of duty, or of course out of love for his subordinates. He's working for money. And that's why he's like, well, this isn't worth it. I'm running away. And I think this is a term of derision in this context, that actually you're supposed to love these subordinates who are pretty markedly imperfect and making your life difficult, right? And this whole thing of actually leading them, teaching them, sacrificing for them, not caring what the world thinks, right, or seeking its riches, but actually believing that we're going to give them what is good, what is beautiful and fitting, right, which is primarily God's word, which will then order their hearts and minds into harmony with creation and all of this. And I think it's significant here that, right, Christ is the good shepherd because he owns them. That's I don't like that translation. So it should be because they are mine, right? So it's possessive. That's not ownership in the sense of, kind of crass ownership, but it's just like in English, right? With the possessive case, or what's, the genitive in Greek and in Latin, it has to do with relationship. When I say that's my mother, it doesn't mean I own her, right? But it means that you have this kind of familial obligation. I'm not, calling my mother and making sure she's okay because I'm being paid to do it. I'm doing it because she's my mother, right? And that's the language that Jesus is invoking and setting himself aside from the hirelings, who they're just hirelings. And the Father loves this willing obedience and the rightly ordered reality. Interesting, right? It sort of seems like Jesus should say, right, I know my sheep and I'm known as the Father knows me and I know him and I die for him, right? The Father knows me, I know him. And then but I don't die for him, I die for them, because there is this kind of hierarchy in a sense. That's why I said God the Father is the grandfather. But then the other thing that's so key in this is that Jesus doesn't outsource this duty, right?
Yeah.
There are hired hands that are helping him, but it's not outsourced, right? He is doing it himself, and he doesn't just pay the bill and then walk away. I think that even if you think of, in a sense, the bill is paid on Good Friday, on Easter Sunday, he comes into the upper room to get them, right? He's not leaving this to chance, right? Think about your dad coming to get you. Grab your stuff, it's time to go, and that's what's happening. And that's, of course, happens to them quite literally, in a sense, in the upper room, but it's happening also to us.
Yeah, and the word that's used there is what? Ta idia.
Yeah, my own.
Right? That's used in John chapter 1 when he comes to his own, and his own do not receive him.
Yeah, his own. I don't, but not. I own them. That's the right. So
his people. He comes to the people that belong to him, and he belongs to them.
Yeah, no, his own is a great, I think that. But I think sometimes I just, I don't want it to be translated as, I own them, right? They're mine.
I mean, in a sense, we are his possession.
Oh, sure,
right? He
of
does
course.
purchase and win us.
He does. And that does kind of come up in the, so if you look at the introit for this Sunday, it's Psalm 33, which is a creation praise psalm, though it does end with mercy. And of course, we don't get the whole thing, but we get some really key points. It starts with verse 5. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. And that word goodness is misericordias. So maybe we can get rid of the number problem if we use the Latin antiphons. Then we'll know what we're talking about. So misericordias Domini is the goodness of the Lord from that the earth is full of. And this is I just love this. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's spring, right? Mm-hmm. The grass is turning green and the flowers are coming up. And there is this reality that nature itself is bearing witness of the resurrection and the promise of life to come, right? Mm-hmm. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord, and we need to be reordered back to that, reoriented to the reality that the things that we are lusting for, that we are covetous of, are disordered, disproportionate, and have not been given, right? Yeah. And we have been unappreciative, just like back to your Israel in the desert, right? Unappreciative of the things that are laid before us. And there's a lot of goodness in this world still, right? And beauty and so forth. And then, of course, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made. And then it goes to verse 1, rejoice in the Lord, O ye righteous, for praise is comely for the upright. Comely, of course, means handsome, right? Yeah. It is a fitting decoration, or it is a appropriate kind of embodiment and reality, and is pleasing to the Lord and then to men when we are full of praise and we are full of joy because of the goodness that's all around us, that, of course, only really can be good if Jesus has died and is risen.
So I would expect that you'd have Psalm 23 here.
I know.
For the introit. So what is, obviously we can't get into the mind of those who put what they did in the places they did, but what conclusions do you think we can draw by having this psalm as the introit instead of Psalm 23? Does that help inform the rest of the texts?
I think it does. I think that this Psalm 33 has a much more pointed Easter emphasis, because you've got at the end of the psalm here, you have that those who hope in mercy, he will deliver their soul from death, right, and keep them alive in famine. I think that Psalm 23. It's obviously beautiful and good, but I do think that this whole Sunday has a kind of tendency in our hearts to sort of devolve into sentimentality. The whole Good Shepherd thing, and then all those Scottish and English hymns that everybody loves so much. It can kind of just devolve into this Good Shepherd. I don't know how to even say it nicely. Because I don't want to deride the reality that there is appropriate sentimentality here, but I do think that it can be a little shallow, and I think we can do better. I think "Oh Fear Not, Little Flock" is a better hymn than any of the Scottish hymns that we all like so much, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to turn to it here, and this is go ahead.
You do have verse 16, like, no king is saved by the multitude of an army.
Yeah.
And that sort of reminds me of Proverbs 29:31, where it says, the horses are made ready for the day of battle, but victory belongs to the Lord.
Oh, nice.
So there's so in verses 16 and 17 of Psalm 33, a horse is a vain hope for safety, neither shall it deliver any by its great strength. So this is kind of David at the end of his reign, isn't it? When he's putting out the census and he's taking, he's counting up how strong he is.
Yeah. So I think you've got this great. So again, like in terms of these propers, the Old Testament is Ezekiel 34, which is the Good Shepherd in the Old Testament, right? So kind of obvious. The epistle is 1 Peter 2, which I think plays exactly into what you're noticing here in Psalm 33, right? For to this you were called because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth, who, when he was reviled, did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously, who himself bore our sins in his own body on the tree, so that we might live for righteousness. By his stripes you were healed, and so forth. This here, I think, shows us, once again, that meekness is not weakness, right? Yeah. But that in fact, really self-control is the greatest strength. Not being ruled by your passions, not becoming angry and acting, with bolstering or with, blustering words and foul language and volume and threats, and right? I mean, that feels in the moment stupidly like strength, but it's total weakness. So, I mean, you think about a dad. I mean, think about leading a family, guiding a wife, being a pastor, right? This is the model, right? That we don't right when we're reviled, we don't revile in return, and the standard is higher for the father than it is for the sons in a human family, right? That I mean, there is the sons will revile at times. They will criticize, they will complain, they will balk, they will fuss. Why can't we do the things that the other kids get to do? Why don't we have these things? Why are you so cheap? Right? They will say things that are inappropriate, that are insubordinate, and likewise. And it's not like the father be like, well, I'll show them, right? I can do it too. No, right? This is what we're being called to.
And there's nothing worse when you see like a grown man trying to fit into the cool kids crowd.
Right. Or there's nothing more devastatingly painful than a father who insults his sons. It's just devastating to sons and, neglects them or insults them. And I would say in a similar way, right? I mean, pastors of their members, right? District presidents of their pastors. I mean, right on up the, commanders of their, right? I mean, when you're the subordinate, you want the praise of your father, right? Yeah. And when you get reviling, and I mean, it's, from the father's point of view, we get it, right? The sons aren't as good as they should be. They're immature. And they're weak, but you're supposed to guide them and teach them by example, right? As Christ was. And I mean, this is specifically, but don't mistake this as just, rolling over, right? I mean, again, this is about exercising self-control, and that's real strength when you can take a hit and not feel like you have to respond back
in kind.
Yeah. So I think that's a marvelous sort of thing. The hireling, part of how I think we run away from our duties, is that's why I say, like, it's not even necessarily noticeable to most of the world. We run away from our duties by kind of self-pity and emotionalism and, this kind of despair or futility and covetousness, right? That is that, I sort of just vainly and proudfully and grossly wishing my wife was like some other man's wife rather than seeing in her the goodness of the Lord that's been provided. Yeah. Or,
Well, and it seems like the contradiction to, if you want to go down the road of like discussing this as leadership, the contradiction is to then show what did Jesus do, right? He remained under his Father's authority. Yeah. Right. So you only have authority being under authority, not by being independent of it.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And it's
I mean, is that hard. Something you would want to point out of, okay, this is actually addressed to fathers and anyone in sort of a leadership capacity, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or men in a leadership capacity.
But women too, for sure. And in fact, I mean,
How
I think,
so?
Well, I think there is definitely, this shepherd is a nurturing figure as well, right? He's not just simply, teaching these sheep how to forage for themselves. He's actually providing comfort, and so there is definitely, I think, both sides of the equation in this.
Okay.
So there is, and that's of course, I think, the kind of the thing that's maybe more prone to sentimentality. But it's real and it's good. Jesus, carrying the sheep, going out for the one that was lost, right?
Yeah.
That's much more in some ways a mom thing than a dad thing. Being much more concerned about the weak and not, but then also, the gentleness right on throughout it that we expect as well. And I mean, that's appropriate for fathers as well. But I mean, the virtue sits more firmly of nurturing and comforting in the mother than it does in the father. But it belongs to the father also. I mean, none of these things are exclusive, or they aren't really exclusive virtues, right?
Yeah.
And mothers have to make plenty of sacrifices. And I also do think a little bit, I don't have a Bible passage for this. Maybe I'm wrong on this. I do think there is a little bit of role reversal when it comes to mothers and fathers when they're dealing with the opposite sex in their children. So I do think there's a kind of sense in which mothers are, I think rightly, naturally sterner with their daughters than they are with their sons. And fathers, vice versa, right? So, I don't know.
I mean, I think that crosses over in the teenage years.
Oh, yeah. That's probably fair.
I think that, for whatever reason, there is, I mean, I think mothers remain stern with their daughters, but it changes that sternness that they have for their sons changes when they get older, and suddenly it becomes, this is going to really sound horrible, but it's heard as nagging from the sons. And it might not be the case, but that's how they hear it. And there's the father's opportunity to teach them how to hear correction from a subordinate.
Yeah.
And not that the mom is a subordinate in this regard, but how do we hear correction from a female? And because they're coming into their own right at that time and wanting to take up what it means to be masculine, and they're learning that, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the tone or just the pitch of the female voice just rubs teenage boys the wrong way.
Well, I think it's their pride, but I also think that what I thought you were going to say, and I think kind of happens in those teenage years. I think there's this sort of sense in which the boys become a bit of a threat to the mother, and there becomes this sort of fear that they're going to be bad men because they're feeling their oats, right? And they're feeling their masculinity and their strength. And by this point, they're stronger physically than their mother. And they feel, wrongly often like, oh, if I'm the, typical shallow thinking men, right? Might makes right. And, my mother should respect this. And she sees in that, I think, all of her, the vulnerability of women that they bear in this world because of this, I think, is all of a sudden like, oh my goodness, what if he's a psychopath wife abuser? What if because he's acting like a jerk right now, right? And so I think that her kind of fear of men and bad men, kind of, it has a possibility to come out. And I also think that at this point, she develops a new kind of sympathy for her daughters at that age because they're becoming kind of her clan, her peers in a way. So, I mean, it's a funny.
It is fascinating.
And it's all, I think, it has its, help acknowledging the reality that men and women are different goes a long ways in kind of understanding some of this. And I think also guarding against these abuses. Teenage boys need mothers, and they need. I like what you said, and I haven't thought of it in those terms before, but I think it's absolutely right. They do need to learn, right? They have to learn respect for their mother, and they are still, she is not subordinate to them at this point, even if they think that she should be, and that's a difficult, complicated lesson, and they have to learn primarily, right? The most important thing for young men to learn is self-control.
Yeah.
How to take an insult, right? How to take an unjust insult or even accusation, how to, how to respect women for what they are and not try to make them like us, but then also not to become one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I mean, there's just a lot there to go into.
Well, let's go back to let me bring a couple other things from the other sort of propers that I think play along with this as sort of a leadership text, as it was, or this idea of, particularly Psalm 33, right? So it starts with this call to rejoice, right? And then it starts with creation, right? And then it moves, as you say, right, to this, right, we're not going to be saved by, a mighty man is not delivered by great strength. There's a lesson for teenage boys, right? Right. If your teenage boys are going to be delivered, it's going to be by the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But then look at this in 18, which is in part of the intro. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, right? I know my own, he says. He is watching us. He is actually protecting, providing, right, through all of this, and on those whose hope is in his mercy, not in their own strength. And there is this marvelous promise here, right, that he does actually know what he's doing, and he is not going to let us destroy ourselves or destroy our faith. He is gonna bring us about. And here in the collect, I think this is an interesting collect. It doesn't use shepherd language at all. It says, O God, through the humiliation of your Son, you raised up the fallen world. Grant to your faithful people, rescued from the peril of everlasting death, perpetual gladness and eternal joys. Now, this is, I think, really interesting, right? So you've got, of course, that kind of resurrection language, right? That through the humiliation of the Son, by his death, we have been elevated. We've been raised up, and all of the fallen worlds being restored, right? And but then the request is, grant to your faithful people, rescued from the peril of everlasting death, perpetual gladness and eternal joys. Not, again, creature comforts, right? Not great wealth on earth, not great prestige and honor among men, not great physical prowess and strength, right? But perpetual gladness and eternal joys. Again, this is a call to look at, to have our hearts and minds ordered according to the Bible or according to God's will, rather than, our kind of five senses or pleasure and those sorts of things.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where I think, leaders of all stripes, right, have a difficult time dealing with this because they will fall off the horse into either ditch.
Yeah.
Either they will focus so much on all the preparations and the strength and forget about trusting in the Lord, or they will say, oh, well, it doesn't matter what I do. Yeah. And that's what I love about that proverb, because it's like the horses are made ready for the day of battle, but victory like there are things that you need to be doing things.
Yeah.
And be making ready and fulfilling the calling that God has given you. But in the end, don't take credit for it.
Right. Well, right, find your comfort in the promises. So you've got here, right, you can't, you're a hired hand, right? But you're also a son of the Father. And there you are to guard your children and your wife or your congregation or your synod, whatever, your country. And the wolves are coming. And the answer is not, look, Jesus beat the devil. He's no threat. No, he's a threat. And he has to be resisted and he has to be fought, right? We're not going to run away. We're going to do what it takes. And, if need be, we're going to lay down our lives, right? Jesus in the epistle, right? Jesus, who suffered for us to leave us an example, right? Not just to rescue us, but also an example. And so, if I die doing this, I die doing this.
So what's the difference between a hired hand and a steward?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if there's a lot of difference, actually, because you're still caring for both of them, at least in this, in this context, when we're talking about the hired hand who is working as an under shepherd, right? He's still taking care of the sheep. He's doing, in fact, he looks almost exactly like the actual one. He's doing all the same work that he was the one who hired him for is. I think we're never really called to be merely stewards, right? We are stewards, of course, right? And I love this in Luther's explanation of the introduction to the Lord's Prayer, right? Our true Father is our Father in heaven, not our dads, not our biological or the fathers that raised us. But we do not, it's not like we're qualifying this, when we tell people, those are my children, right? I mean, really, they're God's. I'm just a steward. Look, there's no just a steward. It's kind of both things at the same time. They're really your children. They really do belong to you. And you really do have a duty and a deep affection. And that's good and that's right. At the same time, it has to be ordered in that you are also a son of the Father and they belong to him, and they belong to him more fully than to you. So I think when a hired hand or a steward, in the best sense of the term, is going to actually feel that he is part of the family, and that this is actually because you can actually this isn't like the world we live in. You can actually be adopted into this family and given a part of the vineyard or given a part of, right? I mean, it's so crazy that, right, this to share in God's kingdom means to share in the rule of his kingdom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's to have dominion over the earth. It's a remarkable thing. So there is a distinction because we're not the ones who die for the sins of the world, but there is a sharing in it and a real sharing, right? Jesus isn't just offering us wages. He's actually offering us a home.
Mm-hmm. So could we say that a hired hand in the sense that the scriptures is using it, never sees itself as a member of the family, always standing on the outside. So kind of like the parable of the vineyard. And these guys that run away, for sure, right? They don't actually they don't love the sheep. They love the money they've been promised. And the vineyard workers, they just want the denarius or more. Yeah.
They don't care
about
what
the focus is on, do you see the things do you take on godly jealousy for the things that God has given you?
Yeah. Do you love them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are both right. You actually love them, right? Love fulfills the law, and you're actually thankful. This is my wife. This is the one that God chose for me. Has joined us together, right? And she's full of virtue, and she's full of beauty and goodness, and I'm not comparing her to others, and I'm not imagining, I wish she was different than she is. I want to guide her. I want to teach her. I want to help her, right? I'm not, just like, she can do, nothing matters. But at the same time, right, I actually love her. And my duties to her are often a joy. It's not simply a burden.
Yeah.
It can be a burden, right? Because our flesh is weak and because her flesh is weak. And there are seasons and there are times, to be sure, when marriage, Christians on this side of glory live in marriage very unhappily, right? And where it's awkward, it's painful, it's frustrating, it's disappointing. And maybe there's even some fear there. And those seasons are real, and we recognize them for what they are. So, and when we're in them, though, it's all the more important to confess what we also know is real and true, and that is that God has joined us together, and this is for her good and for my good and the good of our children and the good of the world and the good of the church, and I'm not giving up on it. I'm going to do my duty, even if, God forbid, she's telling me she doesn't want me to, right? So I think that it can be a burden. There are times when it can be unpleasant. At the same time, you probably can, I hope you can, remember times when it wasn't just a burden or a duty, when it was a joy. Yeah. And those times will come again. These seasons are temporary. That's why they're seasons. Even if you're currently in a happy place, I mean, it's good to remember that, well, there'll be some sad days ahead also.
So then, so John 10 is describing what it ought to look like. It's giving us a picture, right, of how things are meant to be.
Right.
So then what sort of things can we draw from that to say, okay, this is what it's meant to be, this is what we ought to do?
Yeah. Well, we've got to see the wolves that are coming. So we have to be able to, discern the times and discern the dangers and guard against them. And I think, so the first thing we ought to be doing is we have to know what the ideal is, and then we have to see what is a threat to it, and sort of what are the dangers to faith and to virtue, right? What are the threats in our society? And, the sort of famous thing is the criticism of historians is always that the generals were preparing for the last war, right? And they don't see the war in front of them, and they fight the current war so, I mean, we need to see that in our own lives too, I mean, what's the real kind of threat to our families? I think, and I mean, it's not that difficult to discern, I don't think. I mean, we have in our culture incredible sexual deviancy and libertinism that is a great threat, and that's closely tied to digital media. Those are probably some of the most obvious threats that simply can't be ignored. But, along with that, we have, all sorts of sort of corollary dangers. The sort of lack of kind of virtue and concern for virtues, and the desire just simply to be productive or make money in kind of, the crassest sense of the word. I mean, on down the line it goes, but I think to see the wolves that are coming, to recognize what my family and my congregation needs to be prepared for and warned against, trying to identify our blind spots, even though at some level that's impossible. So that's the first thing. And then, I mean, the other thing, of course, and maybe even actually the way more important side of this is that we cannot leave the sheep. We cannot flee, right? That even if they take us, even if it's a surprise attack we never saw coming, when we see the pain and the damage and the threat to the sheep, we've got to stay and fight, right? We've got to teach, we've got to guide, we've got to nurture, all those things.
So how is leaving enacted in kind of daily experience, I suppose?
I think it's all about this kind of passivity stuff mostly, right? It's not having family devotions. It's not making them recite the catechism. It's not teaching them to memorize hymns. It's not making the children do chores because it's easier. Right? I mean, it's just kind of everything that like it's easier to do stuff yourself, just all of these kind of always taking the easy path or be, because we're always being tempted to that. And so I think it's mostly about letting the sheep choose their own way instead of actually guiding them, teaching them, right? Disciplining them.
Yeah.
I don't think of course it could be worse than that. It could be beating your wife. It could be having extramarital affairs. It could be abandoning, moving across the country. Those things would also be fleeing, and those would be wrong. I'm against those also. But I think, the way that it attacks us in our kind of more subtly in our daily life is to just, I don't want to do devotions. I just want to go watch TV. I don't want to make this kid do his homework. I just want to, scroll the internet. I think it's being there, being present, and doing our jobs,
So in light of that, how necessary is being around other leaders who will hold you accountable?
Yeah, I think that's we need that as well, right? Especially if we recognize that we are under shepherds, right? And we're not doing this, right? This is a big operation. You're working in the vineyard, or I like Nehemiah, rebuilding the city walls.
Yeah.
You're working on your own little section of the wall in a sense, but it's connected to other sections. And we got a Bible in one hand and a sword in one hand and a hammer in the other, right? Or whatever. I don't know what are these make? What's the thing? A trowel in one hand. So anyway, I think that is all part of this. That our families aren't isolated from one another. And hopefully our congregations aren't either, right? That we're actually living together in community, and our families join together in congregations, and our congregations, join together in synod. And that's exactly right, because there's lessons to be learned and to be passed on mostly from the older to the younger. And there's also the need for the younger to reinvigorate the older with zeal and to keep them accountable, that they don't become lazy and complacent. And there's also just the mutual encouragement, right, of being together and sort of being reminded that this is good, that it's worth it, and that, yesterday you worked on your part of the wall and then it crumbled in the night and it's worse than it was from before. You just got to keep on keeping on.
Do you think there's a sense in bringing up the Nehemiah account that part of our passivity or our failure to lead is that we don't fight and build at the same time? We want to do one or the other.
Yeah, maybe that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good,
because we kind of want to compartmentalize. Oh, it'd be better if we just focused on the one thing.
Yeah,
and so we're going to do all the fighting. Meanwhile, we're not actually building up the things that need to be built up.
Yeah.
Or just build up, and so meanwhile we're not fighting off the things that need to be fought off.
Right. No, and I think it's that latter that we're more prone to. It's fine to build your city wall, right? But you're not allowed any aggressive actions. It's fine to state the doctrine in the positive sense, but no anathemas, right? That's the kind of typical.
That's interesting. I would think that the more likely path, I think particularly of men, is to do some fighting, but to forget to build.
Yeah. Well, probably. I think it probably
it's probably personality.
Probably depends which is harder at the moment. We try to do it.
Exactly.
Well, I'll do that instead. And sometimes that's not a bad strategy, actually, for overcoming the flesh. Right. It's better to do. But no, I think that's a good point. We have to sort of do all of the work. And there's always the parts that we procrastinate. We always procrastinate on the things we don't enjoy as much.
Yeah.
So that's a good call. How we actually, when thinking of Nehemiah, I was also thinking of how the problem is again, we get away with stuff. It looks like there was, So I was, I got angry last night and I yelled at my son and I called him a name. Right. That's terrible, by the way. So let's say I did that. Well, nothing happened. that I could see, right? So I
Now,
think,
what do you mean you called it?
I called him a name. I called him stupid. Say,
Gotcha.
him, right? You should never do that. God forbid. We should strive to never do that. If we do,
well, what if what they did was stupid?
Well, I think
Are you distinguishing between saying like that was really dumb, or
and you're dumb.
You're an idiot?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can name things as stupid, but we shouldn't name people, especially our sons.
Yeah,
it's subtle, but it's important.
Be lazy. You're being lazy.
You're being lazy, right? You're not lazy. Yeah. You're a good. Yeah. You're a good human, but you have a weakness, and we're going to deal with that. So yeah, So I think let's say but in the moment, right? You're mad. And the flesh is weak, and you feel a certain pain, and so you want to strike out, and you want to hurt him. That's awful, but it's a real thing of sinful fathers, right? So you called him stupid, and you did damage, but you can't see it. So it seems like you got away with it.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't get named. It doesn't get repented. It doesn't get. You don't seek forgiveness, and then So it's sort of like with the wall. It's like, well, I was lazy yesterday. I didn't build up my wall, and nobody attacked.
Yeah.
And, so it was fine. We got away with it. Well, you didn't really. I think that's a lot of what happens to us also is that, the devil, he's willing to, I always love this with The Devil Went Down to Georgia. It's such a great song in so many ways. And the best part is, of course, Johnny lost everything, but he doesn't know it. He got the fiddle of gold. He thinks he won. He didn't win the contest. He lost. He gave his soul away. And he thinks he's not going to find that out till he dies and goes to hell, right? Look, a fiddle of gold is a cheap price, and so these things we have to sort of be conscious of what our duty is, and just because it seems like we get away with it, we're not getting away with anything in that sense, right? Our leadership actions, our leading of our family have deep consequences for the people we're leading. And we have to take that seriously.
Yeah. So how do you move forward on this? Like in terms of, you're going to have to, you can't say it all, can you?
No, you can't say it all.
Maybe you could. I don't know. It'd be long.
Well, I think it's just,
maybe it's worth being long.
Maybe it's worth being long and just saying, look, boys, this isn't just about pastors, This is about every Christian's duty to his neighbor within his vocations. And it's not just for men. It's for, it's for all of those who are exercising authority or who are subordinate, which is all of us, And, we need to think about this reality that there are wolves coming, and how are we going to deal with this? And how are we going to actually prepare ourselves for perpetual gladness and eternal joys rather than temporary?
Do you spend any time describing the wolves?
Yeah, I think that could be a way to recognize that the church is under attack. The church's doctrine is always under attack, right? And, the particular, again, it's easy to go after this kind of big, obvious, bad guys. And that's worthwhile. And I think that has its place to name it and to recognize this. But then it's always, I think, helpful for some kind of concrete realities to say, we need to be present for the sheep that have been given to have been put into our flock. We need to.
So, you've already described one way in which the wolves are present in terms of, electronic sexualization. Is that the only way or the primary way? Or
sports. For families, I'm thinking of, kind of travel teams, college, that's a big threat. There's so many debt. You could go on and on. There are lots of ways that we're being attacked and undermined, right? The desire for glory, whether that's at work by praise or if it's at work by money. There's so many things that are, the flesh is just so weak. It's being attacked kind of on all sides. And I think we just have to we have to name some of these things and help people think about the fact that, okay, great, you don't have any televisions in your house and you don't have access to the internet. I mean, that'd be pretty unusual, but, this isn't, you've recognized this big bad wolf, congratulations. But, that doesn't mean that, you're suddenly sin-free or that Satan won't find another way to attack. And I'm not trying to say that all of these attacks are equal. I don't mean to, I don't want to make them like this is all the same and, nobody's perfect and everybody's a sinner and blah, blah, blah. Look, we got to take care of the most obvious and most deadly and dangerous things first. But we can't ignore, the other problems. And we do.
You mentioned earlier that, seeing the wolves coming necessitates knowing what the ideal is. Do you think that there's a sense in which, one, we don't know what the ideal is, and that there is a real attack on what is ideal and what should be ideal?
Yeah. And I think that has a lot to do with that meekness, right? The actual meekness of Christ and the example of Christ. Because I think it's either, right, it's totally effeminate and, just kind of softness on the one side. And then on the other side, it's just, kind of anger. As the two sort of exaggerated extremes, and to try to find this reasonableness in the middle, not that it's a compromise between the two, but where it's actually reasonable, right? It's actually gentle in the right sense of the word. That's it's self-control. It's right. It's strength, and that doesn't revile when reviled, but doesn't, that's not meaning like it's not rolling over for it. So I think the ideal, is Jesus. I mean, he is the example.
When you say anger, you mean bitterness.
Yeah, bitterness, right. I mean, right. Anger that's disordered.
Yeah.
Right. Even if it began from the right thing, it's exaggerated. It's, and it's self-indulgent. Mm-hmm. Right. And we all know what that feels like. I mean, we've all done that. I mean, there is a righteous anger, and there are things that anger is the right response to, but it still should be controlled.
Yeah.
Right. Right. What does Paul say? Let your anger be without
sin.
Sin.
Be angry, but do not sin.
Be angry, but do not sin. Thank you. I'm sorry. That's what I was trying to come up with. I don't know why that was so hard. I mean, I love that passage because it's hilarious to me. Whenever we try to talk about this, it seems like there's such a kind of immediate response. Well, there is a righteous anger. Yeah, I know that. And that's right. And we do need to say that. But I think it's hilarious that Paul has to put this, be angry, but do not sin. Mm-hmm. Because chances are, if you're angry, you are sinning. It's, and I don't just mean that in the kind of, that, nothing we do is perfect. That's true too. But it's just that, this is sort of like, have sexual desire, but do not lust. Mm-hmm. And we really don't know what it is on this side of glory to have sexual desire apart from lust. And we don't really know what it is on this side of glory to have anger without sin. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have sexual desire. We should. We were created for it. It's part of how God propels life into the world, and it's a beautiful gift. But it is, kind of, playing with fire. And anger is a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Speaking in that way, does that not create people who are prone then to passivity?
Well, I hope not.
To wanting to tiptoe around and always feeling like they have to walk on eggshells.
I mean, Jesus doesn't. So, no. So it's, yeah. I mean, this is our model. That we want to be. We want to be this, and there's lots of ways that this can go wrong. I mean, I think in fairness, kind of coming back to something that came up earlier, this sort of fear of women fearing men. There's a legitimacy in that, a vulnerability that they have, and I think it's right for us to recognize also that the kind of damage that is done by a violent man is probably worse than the violence that is suffered because of a passive man. That's kind of the consequences are so terrible that I think there is a kind of fairness to say, and this isn't in any way to say passivity will just be fine. It won't be. Your children will be dysfunctional. They'll be confused. They'll be harmed by it. So at the same time, I'm not sure that's not that we can compare these things. We're not trying to choose the lesser evil. But, if you beat your children, the damage you're going to do to them psychologically as well as physically is going to be devastating. And I think it's probably fair to say worse, at least. Yeah, I mean, that's hard to judge, but I think there's a reality there.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know.
But the problem is...
I don't want either.
No, and I think... Okay, so here's what I don't like.
Because it seems like now we have a really huge problem that the whole culture suffers under.
I agree.
Because of the passivity versus the few households that suffered under the harshness.
Right. Well, I think.
And so again, that's not to diminish what that household suffered or to say that, that's better. I don't know if there's a better or worse there, but I guess if I were playing the would you rather game, I would rather have someone who periodically would give into anger, but not, and then recognize that was overstepped, than someone who was constantly talking them out of doing something to be passive.
Yeah.
I guess that's like when we were at seminary and counseled constantly to tread lightly and teach, and all of these things, never do anything unless everyone's on board, that kind of thing. It creates sort of a culture of passivity.
Yes.
And I guess that's sort of part of my concern.
Yeah, I think there's a sense in which, like, let's imagine, this is a road that we're driving down and there's ditches on both sides of it, right? And it's a 2-lane road with a turning lane in the middle. So we got 3 lanes and we're driving down this road and there's no oncoming traffic, right? So the safest sort of thing and the place we want to be is actually in the turning lane, right in the middle. But when there's such fear of the left-hand ditch, right, that we're so terrified of that we're driving on the right edge, right? And the problem with that is that we're not in the safest place and we're not where we should be. And then, of course, if one of those tires goes a little bit off on the right-hand side, it can actually send us into either ditch. Mm-hmm. It's probably more likely to send us in the right, but also there's overcorrection, there's the jerking, there's this kind of reality. Yeah. But I think that often kind of what you're railing against, I mean, I think rightly, is this, like, we want to drive down the middle of the road, but there is a kind of exaggeration that actually doesn't want to be in the middle of the road. It's so terrified of one ditch that it's hugging the other side. Yes. And it's actually, even if it's not in the other ditch, it's so close to it, it's actually more dangerous. And the fear is, like, if we're driving down the middle of the road, but someday we could drift. Yeah. Kind of thing. And, well, look, I mean, yeah, someday we could drift. We could, maybe we have already drifted, and that's why we're, so maybe we're driving down the right-hand side of the road and somebody says, let's get into the middle. And then they like, nope, I don't want to be in the middle because I'm so terrified. And I think that's the situation that I think you're describing.
And that's where I feel, or it seems to me that there's a necessity of having others to point out.
Yeah.
Right? You need other heads of households to say, that's interesting.
Right. Yeah.
What leads you to take that path?
Right.
And whether it's overindulgence of anger or overindulgence of passivity.
Right. Well, and I mean, the thing with passivity is that it's worth trying to diagnose. What it's fear, right? Passivity comes from fear of action, or fear of the consequence of action. So, what is it you're afraid of? Is it your wife's opinion? Is it your mother-in-law? Is it your is it your boss? Is it the affection of your children? I mean, there's all sorts of things that I think, that we have to. And then, I mean, I always come to the, Luther's explanation of the first commandment, right? That which you fear is your God.
Yeah.
You can term it, you can think of it in terms of love as well. I mean, but it's the same idea, right? Some person, probably not God, right? You're not worried about what God thinks because, you're worried about what humans think. Mm-hmm. And, so the passivity is usually driven by that kind of fear of consequences.
Yeah. So do you think you'll just go towards fathers here, or do you think that you'll try to do more, and this sounds so hokey, a leadership sermon? Well,
I think people need leadership sermons. Yeah. I mean, I think we are called upon to lead. I mean, followers, right? We're called to follow me. That is actually a leadership thing. And learning to follow is a kind of leadership. I know that sounds bizarre, but it's true. You have to be able to follow to lead. And so these are all intertwined and interrelated. And just because, again, sort of some people have done a bad job with this, doesn't mean that we can pretend like there's nothing to it. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, good. I think it's vocational, right? Helping mothers be mothers, helping, big brothers be big brothers, helping, right? It's not just fathers, it's right on through.
So if you're going to do this, what is the preaching of the gospel here?
Well, I mean, the preaching of the gospel is that Jesus is actually taking care of everything. Yeah. I mean, he's, which I don't mean that is just kind of a cliche ending. Oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's all fine. But at the same time, I mean, there is this just kind of overarching reality. He's given you these children on purpose, and he knows what he's doing, and it's for their good and for your good. And he will bless you in this, as he has been blessing you in this, whether you can feel it or sense it or not. And, the kind of confidence that though you're in some ways not very good at this, Jesus is blessing you through this nonetheless and providing for the world and for you, right? And there are people that are also, your wife is serving you. She is the gospel to you. You don't deserve her for all your complaints about her, and covetousness. The truth is you're deeply blessed to have her taking care of you, right? Loving you, praying for you, feeding you, and so forth. And you're blessed to have a pastor that is trying to teach you the word of God and coming to you when you're sick. And you're blessed to have brothers, and you're blessed to have, right? We are actually being provided for through these through the vocations of others.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a different take, but not a different take, but an expanded take, I think, than what typically we've discussed.
For me, I think for sure, I've usually, been much more focused on pastoral ministry, though this is all applicable to pastoral ministry because, I've often said being a pastor has a lot more in common with being a father than it does with taking care of livestock. And not just because it's people and not animals, but also because maybe that is the main reason, but it is the more, the relationship that pastors have to their congregations is a very paternal. I don't mean that in any kind of condescending way, but it is a very paternal concern or relationship. Yeah.
Well, how in a day where fatherhood is misunderstood and almost hated, it seems like putting forward what the biblical understanding of that is in terms of regaining not only household fathers, but spiritual fathers, and then, fathers within society, the fathers of nations and things like that. This would be a perfect opportunity to discuss what fatherhood really is, even before Father's Day.
Yes. And maybe actually have a better reception of it, since it's not colored by kind of cultural things. Yeah. The other thing that is being an older brother. That's another really kind of fascinating dynamic and relationship. Because that's we use a lot of other terms for it, mentor or anyway, but really that's another thing to think about. Being an older brother, being a younger brother. Someday we'll talk about being a friend. I mean, that's, maybe that's in some ways where the Bible deals with it the most directly is with the word philia.
Well, I mean, I have to say, for our memento group, having, some of the older guys with more experience, that's been fantastic to have them along.
Yeah. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the fraternity, I should say.
Yeah.
That's been it's been really enjoyable. And we're going to try to keep it going. We're kind of, I don't know what you guys have come to think on this, but it took me a little while to get my head around this, and I didn't get it around it on my own. It was actually one of my fraternity members who explained this to me, and I think he's right, that in a way, this is kind of an attempt to foster friendship, to actually, because I was like, well, now that Lent's over, are we going to keep meeting? It says we should keep meeting, and I don't really know that I want to have another Bible study or, weekly, meetings for the rest of my life. And he said, well, this is really, it doesn't need to be much, it can just be, let's get together, have the devotion and drink coffee and talk for, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then go to work. And once a week, it's just a deliberate, again, structure that probably didn't have to exist in the ancient world because people worked real jobs. They didn't work remotely, and they didn't work in cubicles, and they worked on, they saw people all day long. So now, once a week, we spend 30 minutes, 40 minutes just, there's not a real agenda or program, but it's actually befriending one another and caring about one another and having a place to, and then opportunities there exist, through the devotional material and prayer, but also, for spiritual.
The closest thing is that I think is the old farmers who still get together and for coffee once a week and discuss, when are you planting and anything that's going on in town. Yeah.
Once a week. Those guys do that every morning, don't they? Depends on the season.
I think they have different spots. But different people show up to different ones.
I mean, do you remember, you never really came to, when you were a student here, you didn't really come to matins, on the weekday matins and then hang out, did you?
No. I don't think you had that.
Oh, we did. I'm sure we did. Because we used to have
You had the Wednesday morning service, but I don't remember.
Yeah, we had daily matins at 7 a.m.
Yeah, I didn't.
We don't now. The school's changed it. But anyway, it was. There have been times over the years where guys would come to matins. It was almost never women, and then matins would be over at 7:30, and we'd sit around, drink coffee for a half hour every day, or 4 or 5 days a week. And it really was it has been a joy in my life over the years. So,
some of that's just restoring that and making sure that we're, the word just escaped me, but intentional about it.
Yeah, and recognizing we're living again in a society, in a world where men particularly have difficulty making friends. Yeah. And if you don't, good for you. There probably are men around you who do. And so even if you don't need this fraternity, you might be able to serve your neighbor in this way. And it doesn't have to be a big, giant burden and a giant time commitment, but it can be something that can really make the difference. It can really make a difference in men's lives, especially when they're going through those dark times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks, Dave, for
thank you.
Your time, and we'll pick up with Easter 4?
Yes.
Jubilate? Is that what it is?
I don't know. I was trying to remember. I think that sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. We'll pick up next time.
All right. Thanks.